The restaurant went by the name Luminous, perched on the 42nd floor of the Hartman Tower in the heart of downtown, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering cityscape below. The kind of establishment where you booked a table 3 months in advance and where the cheapest entree started at $60. I walked through the door in a plain black dress I'd picked up at Target and a pair of flats I'd been wearing for 2 years. Near the hostess stand stood my sister Caroline, draped in a designer cocktail dress that likely cost more than my monthly car payment. Beside her, her husband Derek wore a suit that telegraphed wealth before he ever opened his mouth. "Oh, you actually made it," Caroline said when she spotted me, her smile stopping well short of her eyes. "I wasn't entirely sure you would." "It's Mom's birthday," I replied simply. "Where else would I be?" As we made our way toward the private dining room, she leaned close and whispered, "Let's hope you can handle the bill." This place doesn't come cheap, but Derek insisted on nothing but the best for Mom. I said nothing and kept walking, past tables of impeccably dressed diners, through the hum of a restaurant that operated in a league of its own. The private room was breathtaking. A long table laid for 12, set with crystal stemware and fine china, silver candle holders casting a warm, flickering glow. Beyond the windows, the city sparkled like a scattering of diamonds against the dark. Mom sat at the head of the table, elegant in a navy dress. Dad was beside her, already nursing his first scotch. My brother James and his wife were there, along with Aunt Linda, Uncle Tom, Caroline's in-laws, all the people who constituted our family's inner circle. "There she is," Mom said when she saw me, rising to embrace me, though the hug felt obligatory rather than warm. "We were starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost." "Traffic," I said, which was the truth. "Well, you're here now." She gestured toward the far end of the table. "We saved you a seat." The seat in question was wedged between my teenage nephew, who hadn't looked up from his phone since I arrived, and an empty chair, effectively the least desirable spot in the room. I sat without a word. Caroline glided into her place of honor beside Mom. "Should we start with champagne?" she announced to the table. "Mom deserves the very best tonight." "The 2012 Dom Perignon," Derek added. "Nothing less." A server materialized almost instantly. "Excellent choice, sir." "Right away." I watched the whole production in silence. Caroline lived for these moments, the opportunity to put her success on display, to show what she and Derek could afford. She was a senior marketing director at a pharmaceutical company. Derek ran a flourishing law practice. Together they cleared around $400,000 a year. It was genuinely impressive, and I didn't begrudge them that. The champagne arrived in a gleaming ice bucket. The server moved around the table, filling glasses one by one. When he reached me, Caroline raised her hand with theatrical sweetness. "Actually, maybe just water for my sister. Champagne's a bit steep." "I'll have the champagne," I said evenly. The server glanced between us, visibly unsure. "Of course," he said, and filled my glass. Caroline's smile pulled tight at the corners, but she lifted her flute toward Mom. 60 years of grace, wisdom, and strength. "We love you." Glasses clinked. The champagne was superb, crisp and cold in exactly the right way. Dinner began to unfold. Appetizers arrived: oysters, crab cakes, a silky butternut squash soup. Caroline ordered on behalf of the table with the breezy confidence of someone accustomed to spending freely. "Isn't this extraordinary?" she said to Mom. "Derek discovered this place. Apparently, the owner is some young entrepreneur who turned it into the most coveted reservation in the city." "It's lovely," Mom agreed. Caroline leaned toward me while the others were absorbed in conversation. "Just so you're prepared, each appetizer runs about $30. We're splitting the bill." "Splitting it?" I asked, but we thought everyone might chip in a little. "100 from you, if that's manageable." I nodded and took another sip of champagne. The main courses came next: filet mignon, pan-seared salmon, duck confit, each plate an exercise in culinary artistry, garnished with edible flowers and microgreens. This steak is $75, Caroline announced, slicing into her fillet. Wagyu beef, flown in from Japan. Derek, your taste is impeccable. Derek beamed. Only the finest for family. Around the table, James was holding court about his recent promotion. Aunt Linda was rhapsodizing about a cruise she'd taken, and everyone was performing their own version of a successful life. I ate my salmon quietly. It was cooked beautifully, skin crisped to perfection, the flesh tender and flaking apart at the touch of a fork. So, how's work? James asked me eventually, in the tone one might reserve for inquiring about a recurring but minor ailment. Good, I said. Still at that little cafe? Caroline asked. Assistant manager by now? Something like that, I answered. That was the narrative they had all settled on. For years earlier, I'd walked away from my corporate career and told everyone I needed time to figure out my next move. I'd taken a job at a small downtown cafe, making coffee, serving pastries, working the early shift. What I had never told any of them was that I owned that cafe, along with the building it occupied and 4 other restaurants scattered across the city. It must be nice, Caroline went on, having no real pressure. Just making coffee, no deadlines, no stress. The pay must be rough, though. I get by, I said. I'm sure you do. She patted my hand with the gentleness of someone offering comfort to a lost cause. There's absolutely nothing wrong with simple work. Corporate life isn't for everyone. Dad cleared his throat. Caroline, that's enough. I'm being supportive, she protested. I think it's lovely that she's found something that makes her happy, even if it isn't exactly ambitious. Mom smoothly changed the subject, and the conversation drifted toward safer ground. The food kept arriving: truffle mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus, artisan rolls with imported butter. Dessert was a spectacle in its own right. A chocolate soufflé that had been ordered at the meal's outset, crème brûlée crowned with fresh berries, a cheese course featuring varieties I couldn't begin to pronounce. This must be running into the thousands, Aunt Linda said, visibly impressed. About 4,000, all told, Derek confirmed. But Mom's worth every penny. Caroline squeezed Mom's hand. We wanted tonight to feel special. Something you'd carry with you. It's wonderful, Mom said. Thank you, both of you. As the dessert plates were being cleared, Caroline leaned toward me again. About that $100, is that going to be a problem? Not at all, I said. Good, because honestly, I wasn't certain you'd even be able to afford to show up tonight. She kept her voice low, but not quite low enough. Derek caught it and smirked. I set my napkin on the table and reached for my water glass. That's when the kitchen doors swung open. Chef Antonio Romano stepped out in person. Antonio was a figure of genuine legend in the culinary world, trained in Paris and Rome, awarded a Michelin star at 28, the man who had made Luminous the most sought-after table in the city. He almost never emerged during service, and he certainly didn't make personal visits to ordinary guests. Yet here he was, crossing the dining room with purpose, his gaze fixed directly on me. Miss Bennet, he said warmly as he reached our table. I wanted to come out personally to ensure that this evening has been everything it should be. The room went still. Every conversation died mid-sentence. I smiled up at him. Everything has been exceptional, Antonio. Thank you. The salmon was prepared exactly to your specifications? Perfect, I confirmed. Wonderful. And the private room, the temperature, the lighting, all to your satisfaction. Exactly right, I said. He gave a small, satisfied nod. Excellent. Please don't hesitate to ask for anything at all. It is always an honor to have you with us. He offered a slight bow and made his way back to the kitchen. For roughly 5 full seconds, no one at the table moved or spoke. Then Caroline found her voice. Why did he call you that? Call me what? I asked, keeping my expression neutral. Miss Bennet. Why does he know your name? Why did he come out of the kitchen specifically to check on you? I took a quiet sip of water. Probably because I own the restaurant. The silence that followed was total. Even my nephew lowered his phone. You what? Mom said faintly. I own Luminous, I said. I acquired it 3 years ago as part of a broader investment in the hospitality sector. The color had drained from Caroline's face. That's not possible. Annual revenue runs close to 3 million, I said. After operating costs, it's one of my most profitable ventures. Ventures? Dad repeated. Plural. I own 5 restaurants in the city, I explained. Luminous is the flagship. There's also a French bistro in the Arts District, an Italian place near the waterfront, a sushi restaurant in Chinatown, and a farm-to-table spot out in the suburbs. Plus the cafe where I work, which I also own, along with the 3-story building it sits in. Derek was already frantically scrolling on his phone. Holy shit, he muttered. She's telling the truth. Bennett Hospitality Group, that's you. That's me, I confirmed. He turned the screen to show Caroline. I could make out my professional headshot, the list of properties, annual revenue estimates hovering somewhere around $15 million. But you work at a cafe, Caroline said, her voice barely holding together. You make coffee. I make coffee because I enjoy it, I said. I opened that cafe 6 years ago as my very first business. I still pull morning shifts sometimes because it keeps me anchored. It reminds me of where I started. James was staring at me as though I'd just grown a second head. How did you put together the capital for all of this? I saved everything from my corporate years, I said. Every bonus, every raise. I lived in a studio apartment and drove a second-hand car. When I had enough, I bought a struggling cafe for $60,000, turned it around, made it profitable, and used those profits to buy the building. Then I just kept repeating the process. But that was only 6 years ago, Aunt Linda said. 6 years of 16-hour days, I replied. 6 years of learning the restaurant business from the inside out. 6 years of smart investments and calculated risks. Mom had her hand pressed to her chest. Why didn't you tell us? I tried to, I said quietly. For years ago, when I bought my second property, I invited everyone to the opening. You said you were too busy. When I acquired Luminous, I called to share the news. You said congratulations, then spent the next 20 minutes talking about Caroline's promotion. Caroline's eyes were glistening, though I couldn't quite tell whether it was shame or something else. Every time I reached out with news about what I was building, I continued. Someone would change the subject or brush it off. So I stopped trying. I let you all go on believing I was just the sister who worked at a cafe. It was simpler than fighting to be heard. The server appeared at that moment, presenting a leather folder. The check, Mr. Thompson, he said to Derek. Derek took it on instinct, then looked down at the total. The remaining color left his face. For $1,318, he read, his voice catching. Oh, that won't be necessary, I said. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message. I'm comping the whole dinner. Think of it as my birthday gift to Mom. You can't just, Caroline started. I absolutely can, I said, not unkindly. It's my restaurant. Antonio reappeared, this time carrying a bottle of wine with the care one might afford a sleeping child. Miss Bennett, I thought your mother might appreciate our special reserve in honor of her birthday, a 1982 Chateau Margaux, with my compliments. He poured a small measure for Mom to taste. She lifted the glass mechanically, clearly still processing the evening. It's beautiful, she whispered. After Antonio withdrew, Dad spoke for the first time since the revelation had landed. 15 million a year, approximately? Approximately, I said. He sat with that for a moment. We've been worrying about you, he said at last. Feeling sorry for you. I know. I offered to lend you money last Christmas, he said. I thought you were struggling. I know, I said again. And I genuinely appreciated it. But I've been fine. Better than fine, really. Caroline was crying openly now. I've treated you terribly for years. I've made you feel like you were less than. Yes, I said. You have. I'm so sorry, she managed. I convinced myself I was more accomplished, more significant. I thought I had it all figured out. I know, I said. But you never set me straight. You never corrected me. Would you have heard me if I had? I asked gently. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. We both already knew the answer. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I am so proud of you. I should have said those words years ago. I should have listened when you tried to tell me. It's all right, I said. It isn't, she said firmly. I'm your mother. I should have seen you. Truly seen you. James cleared his throat. So, are you by any chance hiring? Despite everything, I laughed. You're genuinely asking me for a job right now? You're clearly killing it, he said, and I hate my job, so yes. I'm asking. I'll think about it, I said. What remained of the evening had a strange, suspended quality to it. People took turns apologizing, asking questions, watching me the way you watch someone you're only now realizing you never actually knew. In a sense, they hadn't. They had seen the version of me they'd found convenient, the underachiever, the one whose quiet life made their own choices feel more significant by comparison. When we finally made our way out, Caroline caught me in the elevator and held on for a moment longer than I expected. Can we have lunch? She asked. Just the two of us. I want to actually talk. To actually listen this time. I'd like that, I said. Mom kissed my cheek as we parted. My remarkable daughter. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you. You see me now, I said. That's what counts. I drove home alone in my old car, past the buildings I owned, through the city where I had spent years building something real and quiet and entirely my own. My phone lit up steadily with messages, apologies, congratulations, requests for coffee, invitations to lunch. I smiled, set the phone aside, and drove on. Tomorrow morning I'd be behind the counter at my cafe, pulling espresso shots and chatting with regulars, living exactly the life I had always chosen, on my own terms and no one else's. But tonight, for the first time in longer than I could easily remember, the people I came from finally knew who I truly was. And that quietly, completely felt like enough.